The moment my sister mocked me in front of my crush, something inside me broke. And that's when I decided to rise. I still remember that night as if it happened yesterday. The soft music, the flicker of golden lights, and the sharp sting of humiliation that sliced through my chest like a knife. My name is Emma, and I've spent my whole life standing in the shadow of my older sister Lily. Where she was the center of every room, I was the corner no one looked at. Lily had that kind of beauty that drew attention without trying, confident, glamorous, and effortlessly magnetic. I, on the other hand, was quiet, bookish, and always trying to be good enough but never quite reaching the invisible standard she set. Our parents adored her charm. Teachers praised her wit. Everyone, it seemed, was under her spell. I used to think it didn't bother me, that I was fine being the calm one, the invisible one. But all of that changed the moment Ethan came into my life. Ethan wasn't like the others. He was kind, thoughtful, and never looked through me like I was invisible. We were classmates in a literature course, and he often stayed behind to discuss novels with me. His laughter felt like sunlight breaking through clouds I'd been living under for years. Slowly, I began to fall for him, not with fireworks and chaos, but with quiet, steady warmth. When he asked if I'd be coming to the annual spring gala, my heart nearly stopped. "You should come," he said with that easy smile that made my knees weak. "It'll be fun." I spent days choosing the right dress, something simple but elegant. A light blue gown that flowed gently and shimmered softly under light. For once, I felt like maybe I could belong somewhere beyond my sister's shadow. The night of the gala, I stood in front of the mirror, my heart racing as I added the final touch, a silver necklace that had belonged to our late grandmother. It wasn't fancy, but it meant something to me. My reflection didn't scream confidence, but for the first time, I saw someone who was trying. My parents were out of town that weekend, so I left quietly, hoping Lily wouldn't notice where I was going. Of course, that was wishful thinking. Just as I was about to close the door, she appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed in her robe, a knowing smirk tugging at her lips. "You're really going out? Where to? A book club?" she teased, twirling a strand of her perfectly styled hair. I ignored her, clutching my purse. "A university event," I said. "You wouldn't be interested." "Oh, you'd be surprised," she replied, eyes gleaming with mischief. I brushed past her and told myself she wouldn't dare show up. But deep down, a nervous voice whispered that when it came to Lily, nothing was ever off limits. When I arrived at the gala, the venue looked like something out of a dream. Chandeliers glimmered like stars. Laughter floated through the air, and a live band played soft jazz that made the room feel alive. I found Ethan near the entrance, looking as charming as ever in a tailored black suit. His face brightened when he saw me, and for a brief, beautiful moment, I forgot about everything else. "You look amazing, Emma," he said sincerely. I felt warmth flood my cheeks as I smiled back, barely able to believe someone like him could make me feel seen. We talked for a while, and for the first time in a long time, I felt comfortable being me. But the serenity didn't last, because just as the music shifted to something livelier, a familiar laugh cut through the noise like a cruel melody. I turned and my stomach dropped. There she was, Lily, standing at the entrance in a fiery red gown that demanded attention. Heads turned as she walked in like she owned the place. Her lipstick was blood red, her heels clicked with confidence, and her smirk found me instantly. "Oh, I didn't realize this was your kind of event, little sister," she said sweetly, loud enough for nearby people to hear. My throat tightened. "What are you doing here?" I asked quietly, trying to keep calm. "Just came to support you," she said innocently, then winked at Ethan. "I've heard so much about you." He looked confused but polite, unaware of the storm that was about to erupt. As the night went on, Lily found every opportunity to insert herself, complimenting Ethan, laughing too loudly, and drawing attention with every flick of her hair. I tried to stay composed, but my anxiety grew heavier with each passing minute. When the music paused for speeches and toasts, Lily raised her glass and walked toward the microphone as if she belonged there. "Before we continue," she said in her honeyed tone, "I just want to share a funny little story about my sister here." My stomach dropped. "Lily, don't," I began, but she was already going. The hall went quiet as she continued. Emma's always been, how do I say it? Dedicated. When she likes someone, she'll plan every detail, down to practicing what she'll say in the mirror. I actually caught her doing that last week, so if she seems a bit too perfect tonight, just know she rehearsed it. Laughter erupted from the crowd. Ethan's smile faded into awkward confusion. My heart pounded painfully in my chest. "That's not true," I whispered, my voice trembling, but no one heard. The laughter grew louder, sharper. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. Lily basked in the attention, twirling a lock of hair. "Oh, don't look so serious, Em. It's just a joke," she added, her eyes glinting with cruel delight. My vision blurred with tears as I turned and fled the hall, the sound of mocking laughter chasing me out into the cold night. I walked for what felt like hours before I reached home, my heels clicking against the pavement, my chest tight with shame and fury. When I finally reached my room, I ripped off the necklace and threw it onto the dresser, the clink echoing in the silence. I stared at my reflection, mascara smudged, eyes red, lips trembling. I looked broken, pathetic, weak. But then something inside me shifted. Beneath the humiliation, beneath the ache, a new feeling stirred, one that burned quietly but fiercely. I realized I had spent my whole life letting Lily define me. She had always been the loud one, the powerful one, the winner. But what if I stopped playing her game? What if I stopped letting her control how I saw myself? I wiped my tears and straightened my shoulders. The girl in the mirror wasn't the same one who had walked into that gala hoping for approval. This one was angry, yes, but also alive. For the first time, I didn't want to disappear. I wanted to rise, not to humiliate her back, but to become someone she could never touch again. And as the night faded into dawn, I whispered to my reflection, "This is the last time she makes me feel small." It was both a promise and a beginning, the quiet spark of a transformation that would soon become my greatest revenge. The days after that humiliating night felt like walking through fog, heavy, cold, and endless. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lily's smirk, heard the laughter echoing around the hall, and felt that same suffocating wave of shame crash over me. I stopped going out, stopped answering messages, and even avoided classes for a few days. I didn't want to see Ethan or anyone else who might have been there. The thought of facing them made my stomach twist. But time, as cruel as it is, doesn't stop for anyone. Eventually, I had to pick myself up and return to my normal routine, even if I didn't feel like the same person. When I walked onto campus again, I expected whispers, judgmental looks, maybe pity. Instead, I found indifference. People had already moved on, as they always do. The world forgets your pain much faster than you do. Still, something inside me had changed permanently. The version of me who always stayed silent, who smiled through every insult, who forgave without question, she was gone. I realized that waiting for others to treat me with respect was a trap. Respect isn't given. It's demanded, earned, and built piece by piece. That's when I decided to stop surviving in Lily's shadow and start building my own light. The first step was the hardest. I signed up for the university's public speaking club. Just the idea of standing in front of people terrified me, especially after being laughed at so publicly. My hands shook as I filled out the form, but something inside me told me I needed to do it. On the first day, I almost backed out. The room was filled with confident students, all chatting like they belonged there. When it was my turn to introduce myself, my throat tightened and my voice cracked. "My name's Emma," I said softly, barely audible. The club leader, a kind woman named Professor Avery, smiled encouragingly. "Take your time, Emma. We're all learning here." That simple kindness was enough to keep me from walking out. Each week I pushed myself to speak a little louder, a little longer. My first real speech was about courage, not the dramatic movie kind, but the quiet courage it takes to rebuild yourself after you've been broken. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment before people started clapping. That sound, real, genuine applause, felt like healing. Outside of the club, I started volunteering at a local youth center, helping children with reading and creative writing. The joy on their faces when they understood a story or finished a sentence filled a part of me that humiliation had once hollowed out. Slowly, I began to realize that my worth wasn't defined by how people saw me at one party or how loudly Lily laughed. My worth came from what I gave to the world, from the strength I built every day. I started focusing on my studies again, pouring myself into projects and essays. One day, my literature professor approached me after class. "Emma," he said, "we're starting a student-led campaign to promote literacy in underprivileged communities. I think you'd be perfect to lead it." The old me would have panicked and said no. But the new me, the one who was learning to rise, smiled and said, "I'd love to." Leading that campaign changed everything. It taught me how to organize people, how to inspire them, and how to find my voice not just for myself but for others. I found purpose in helping those kids, seeing them learn to believe in themselves. For the first time, people started knowing me as Emma from the literacy campaign instead of Lily's sister. My name was finally standing on its own. I saw it on posters, in campus newsletters, and even on the school website. And that visibility, that recognition, was something Lily couldn't control. Of course, when she found out, she acted supportive at first. She called one evening, her tone sugary. "I heard about your little project." "That's cute," she said, the word little sharp like a dagger. I just smiled to myself. "It's going really well, actually. We're getting a lot of attention." There was a pause. I could almost hear her jaw tighten. "Well, don't forget who taught you confidence," she added with a laugh. But I didn't laugh back. "Actually," I said calmly, "you taught me what happens when I don't have it." That was the first time I stood my ground, and it felt liberating. Weeks turned into months, and everything I touched seemed to bloom. The campaign got featured in the local paper, and I was invited to represent our university at a regional conference. Professor Avery pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "Emma, the faculty has nominated you to deliver the keynote speech at graduation. You've inspired a lot of people here." I was stunned. Me, the girl who used to be invisible, who had been laughed at on stage, now being asked to speak in front of the entire graduating class. That night, I sat on my bed staring at the email confirmation, tears filling my eyes. It wasn't sadness this time. It was pride. I had earned this moment, every bit of it. Around the same time, Ethan reached out again. I hadn't spoken to him since the gala, and seeing his name pop up on my phone sent a strange flutter through my chest. His message was simple. "I owe you an apology. I should have stood up for you that night. You didn't deserve that." For a while, I didn't know how to respond. The part of me that once craved his attention had healed. I finally replied, "It's okay. That night showed me who I needed to become." "No hard feelings," he sent back. "I'm proud of you, Emma. You've changed." And he was right. I had. As graduation day approached, Lily grew quieter. She watched my achievements with a mix of confusion and resentment, like she couldn't figure out how the little sister she mocked was suddenly standing tall. She tried to maintain her confident facade, posting pictures of parties and vacations, but I could sense her discomfort when people asked about me instead of her. For once, the spotlight she'd always guarded so fiercely was slipping from her hands, not because I took it, but because I stopped needing it. Every morning, I rehearsed my graduation speech in front of the mirror, the same mirror where months ago I had promised myself never to let her make me feel small again. But this time, my reflection looked different, strong, calm, unshaken. My voice no longer trembled. I spoke with conviction, with a sense of peace that came from knowing I had built myself piece by piece. I didn't plan to mention Lily in my speech, but part of me hoped she would be there to hear it, to see the woman I had become. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about redemption, not for her, but for me. I wasn't that girl who cried in her bedroom anymore. I was Emma, confident, independent, and finally free from the chains of comparison. And deep down, I knew that when I stepped onto that stage on graduation day, it wouldn't just be to deliver a speech. It would be to reclaim my story. The morning of graduation felt like stepping into a new chapter of my life, one I had written with sweat, tears, and quiet strength. The sunlight streamed through my window, golden and warm, as if the universe itself was congratulating me for surviving everything that had come before. I put on my graduation gown slowly, smoothing out every crease, my fingers trembling not from fear, but from disbelief. A year ago, I could barely look at my reflection without feeling shame. Now, I was about to stand on a stage in front of hundreds of people as the keynote speaker, not because of luck or pity, but because I had earned it. My heart raced, but beneath the nerves was a calm certainty. I had finally become the person I always wanted to be. As I left my apartment, the air was alive with celebration, laughter, flowers, and the hum of excitement that fills the day when dreams become real. At the venue, rows of students in caps and gowns filled the hall. Cameras flashed, families cheered, and professors exchanged proud smiles. I spotted my parents in the front row. My mother waved enthusiastically while my father gave me a small nod, his usual way of saying he was proud. And there, sitting beside them, was Lily. She looked perfect, of course. Hairstyled, makeup flawless, wearing a white dress that made her stand out even among the graduates. But when our eyes met, something was different. There was no smirk, no glint of superiority. Instead, she looked uncertain, almost small. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of pity. Maybe for the first time, she saw me not as her shadow, but as her equal. Or perhaps as someone she could no longer control. When my name was announced, the applause was deafening. My hands trembled slightly as I climbed the steps to the stage, the microphone glinting under the lights. I took a deep breath, feeling my heart steady with each exhale. I had written this speech not as revenge, but as closure. For myself, for everyone who had ever been humiliated and still found a way to rise. I looked out at the sea of faces and began. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who test us the hardest, I said, my voice surprisingly strong. They don't always mean to hurt us. Sometimes they just don't know the damage they cause. But pain can either break us or build us. A hush fell over the room. I could see students leaning forward, parents listening intently. A year ago, I was someone who thought that silence was strength, that if I stayed quiet, I could avoid conflict. But life taught me that silence isn't peace, it's surrender. And I don't want to live a life built on surrender anymore. As I spoke, I wasn't reading from the paper in front of me. The words came naturally from the heart. We all face moments where the world laughs at us, where people make us feel small. But those moments aren't endings, they're beginnings, because that's when you find out who you really are. I glanced toward my parents, who were both crying softly, and then toward Lily. Her eyes glistened, and for once she didn't look away. I knew then that this speech wasn't just about me reclaiming my dignity. It was about reminding her, and everyone else, that cruelty doesn't define strength. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. People stood, clapping, cheering, and for a moment, the sound washed over me like a wave of redemption. I smiled, not the small, timid smile I used to wear, but a full, confident one that came from deep within. I had finally found my voice. As I stepped down from the stage, my professors hugged me, my classmates congratulated me, and even people I barely knew told me I'd inspired them. Every compliment felt surreal, but the truth was I didn't need their validation anymore. I had already validated myself the moment I decided to rise instead of crumble. After the ceremony, my parents found me first. My mother wrapped me in a tearful embrace. "Emma, we're so proud of you," she whispered. My father simply said, "You've grown into someone incredible," but the emotion in his voice said more than any speech ever could. Then, as the crowd began to thin, Lily approached me. She hesitated, something I'd never seen her do before. "Emma," she began softly, her usual confidence replaced by vulnerability. I didn't think you'd become this." I looked at her, remembering all the pain, the laughter at my expense, the years of comparison. But instead of anger, I felt peace. "That's the thing, Lily," I said gently. "You never thought I could, but I did." She blinked, caught off guard by my calmness. For once, she had no clever reply, no sarcastic remark. She just nodded slowly, her eyes lowering, and walked away in silence. Later that evening, after the celebrations ended and the noise faded, I found myself alone on a quiet bench near the fountain outside the hall. The sun was setting, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gold. My phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. "I watched your speech online. You were incredible. I'm proud of you." I smiled faintly, not because his words filled some void, but because I finally realized there was no void left to fill. I didn't need his validation, or my parents, or even Lily's. I had built something stronger within myself. Self-respect. I typed back simply, "Thank you." As I sat there, I thought about everything that had led me to this moment. The humiliation, the heartbreak, the pain. For so long, I had believed that revenge meant making others feel what I felt. But sitting there, bathed in the glow of the setting sun, I understood that real revenge wasn't about payback. It was about transformation, rising above the people who tried to break you, and living a life so full of grace and strength that they can't help but see the difference. That night, I walked home under a sky full of stars, my heart light, my spirit calm. The girl who once cried alone in her room was gone. In her place stood a woman who had faced her deepest humiliation and turned it into power. I had risen above, not to prove Lily wrong, but to prove myself right. And that, I realized with a smile, was the sweetest form of revenge, the kind that leaves no scars, only strength.